Mining Station Kepler 44-2b represented everything the galaxy's three superpowers believed about civilized cooperation, which is to say it was a masterclass in barely contained mutual hostility, wrapped in diplomatic pleasantries. The Zephyrian Collective had built the station with their characteristic obsession for crystalline architecture that somehow managed to look both ethereal and militaristic. The Corvan Empire had graciously provided the industrial equipment, naturally embedding enough surveillance tech to monitor a small moon. And the Thessian Republic, well, they contributed the administrative framework, because apparently someone needed to make sure the paperwork for interspecies paranoia was filed in triplicate. The result was a gleaming monument to galactic detente that hummed with the barely audible tension of three civilizations, pretending they weren't constantly calculating optimal firing solutions for each other's docking bays. It was, by all accounts, a perfectly normal Tuesday, and the morning shift change at security checkpoint Delta 7 proceeded with the kind of mechanical precision that screamed, "We're definitely not planning anything suspicious." The Zephyrian scanner operator, whose species had evolved from something resembling a cross between a praying mantis and a disco ball, performed the ritual equipment calibration with 6 arms, while mentally composing poetry about the futility of existence. The Corvan weapons inspector, built like a tank that had been crossbred with a particularly aggressive filing cabinet, checked and rechecked their sidearm with the dedication of someone who expected trouble but hoped for boredom. Into this tableau of interspecies cooperation walked the most unremarkable human the galaxy had ever produced. He stood roughly average height for his species, possessed the kind of forgettable features that made witnesses struggle to describe him accurately, and wore clothes that could charitably be called aggressively beige. His identification listed his occupation as xenocultural archivist, which was possibly the least threatening job title in recorded galactic history. Even his name was mundane, though the narrator, being possessed of a sense of dramatic timing, will refrain from sharing it just yet. The human approached the checkpoint with the unhurried gait of someone whose biggest daily concern was whether the station's coffee synthesizer had been properly calibrated. Behind him floated a standard-issue personal storage container, the kind of modest luggage that suggested its owner's most exotic possession was probably a mildly interesting book. "Morning inspection, citizen," the Corvan inspector announced, their voice carrying the kind of professional courtesy that barely masked species-based condescension. "Standard protocol. Please place all personal effects on the scanning platform." The human nodded agreeably and began unpacking his belongings with the methodical care of someone who had performed this routine hundreds of times before. Out came a collection of items so thoroughly ordinary that they practically radiated mundane humanness. A data tablet, a communication device, what appeared to be a portable food preparation unit, a small rectangular object that might have been a grooming tool, and several other gadgets that looked like they'd been designed by a committee whose primary goal was avoiding innovation. The Zephyrian scanner operator activated the deep scan protocols with a flourish of crystalline appendages, expecting the usual parade of primitive human technology. Their species had, after all, been manipulating quantum fields, while humans still thought fire was cutting-edge engineering. The scanner hummed to life, bathing the humble collection of devices in streams of exotic particles that could analyze matter down to the subatomic level. Then the readings started coming in. The Zephyrian's 6 eyes widened in perfect synchronization, a biological impossibility that their species had evolved specifically for moments of existential confusion. The data tablet wasn't just processing information, it was performing calculations that required quantum processors operating in 17 parallel dimensions. The communication device was somehow maintaining real-time contact across galactic distances without any detectable power source. The food preparation unit appeared to be running controlled fusion reactions in a space roughly the size of a lunchbox, and those were just the boring items. The grooming tool was manipulating local spacetime to maintain perfect molecular alignment. One of the unmarked devices was casually violating several fundamental laws of thermodynamics, while humming what sounded suspiciously like elevator music. Another appeared to be running a complete stellar cartography program that was more accurate than the station's main navigation computer. The Corvan inspector leaned forward, their massive frame creaking with the sound of stressed metal. "Citizen, these readings cannot be accurate. Please explain the nature of your personal." The human glanced down at his belongings with the mild surprise of someone being asked to explain why water was wet. Oh, just the usual stuff. You know, tablet for reading, phone for calls, coffee maker, sonic toothbrush, portable quantum entanglement, communicator for keeping in touch with the family. Standard travel kit, really. He said this with the casual indifference of someone listing the contents of a grocery bag, completely oblivious to the fact that he'd just described technology that shouldn't exist for another 1,000 years of galactic development. The Zephyrian scanner operator began making high-pitched crystalline sounds that might have been laughter, panic, or their species equivalent of a nervous breakdown. The Corvin inspector's hand moved instinctively toward their weapon before freezing as their military training warred with the growing realization that they might be dealing with something far beyond their comprehension. Because here was the thing about humans that the galaxy's three great powers had somehow managed to miss during their centuries of careful observation. They didn't just carry advanced technology. They carried it the way other species carried pocket. The Corvin inspector's training manual, all 47 volumes of it, had covered everything from detecting concealed antimatter weapons to identifying shape-shifting assassins. What it had not covered, in any of its exhaustively paranoid chapters, was what to do when a sleepy-looking human casually mentioned owning a portable quantum entanglement communicator, the way most people might reference a particularly reliable umbrella. "Sir," the inspector said, their voice achieving that special tone reserved for moments when reality had clearly malfunctioned. "I'm going to need you to step aside while we examine these items more." The human blinked with the patient confusion of someone whose morning routine had been interrupted by bureaucracy. "Is there a problem? I filed all the proper import declarations. The quantum communicator is registered as a Class C personal device, standard tourist permit." This statement caused the Zephyrian scanner operator to emit a sound like wind chimes being fed through a paper shredder. Their species had spent 3 millennia trying to develop stable quantum entanglement communication. The best they'd managed was a system the size of a small building that could transmit exactly 1 bit of information across interstellar distances before exploding spectacularly. Meanwhile, Station Security Chief Varthak, a Thessian whose reptilian features were currently arranged in an expression of profound professional discomfort, had arrived at the checkpoint with the hurried gait of someone whose quiet morning had just transformed into a career-defining crisis. The Thessians prided themselves on being the galaxy's premier diplomats, which meant they were exceptionally good at recognizing when situations were about to become diplomatically catastrophic. "What exactly are we dealing with here?" Varthak asked, their forked tongue flicking nervously as they reviewed the scanning data on a portable display. "Human technology that shouldn't exist," the Corvin inspector replied with the flat certainty of someone whose worldview had just been thoroughly demolished. "The coffee maker alone is running fusion reactions that should require a dedicated power plant." The human perked up at this. "Oh, that's just the basic model. My cousin has the deluxe version. It can synthesize any beverage in the known galaxy and doubles as an emergency matter compiler. Handy for camping trips." This casual revelation prompted Chief Varthak to make a strangled sound that their species typically reserved for diplomatic emergencies of the highest order. They began rapidly scrolling through station protocols, looking for the section that dealt with accidental discovery of impossible technology by tourist personnel. Unsurprisingly, no such section exists. "Citizen," Varthak said carefully, "these devices appear to violate several fundamental principles of physics. Perhaps you could explain how they function." The human tilted his head with the expression of someone being asked to explain how walking works. "Well, the coffee maker uses a microfusion containment field to heat water molecules to the optimal temperature while simultaneously analyzing atmospheric composition to adjust flavor profiles. Standard stuff, really." The quantum communicator maintains entangled particle pairs across galactic distances using folded spacetime manipulation. "You know basic quantum mechanics." He paused, then added helpfully, "I have the user manuals if that would help." The Zephyrian scanner operator had begun making sounds that resembled their species' equivalent of hyperventilation. Their 6 eyes were rapidly cycling through different spectrums of light, as if changing wavelength might somehow make the readings make sense. The data streaming across their displays showed technology that shouldn't be possible with anything less than the combined scientific resources of all 3 galactic powers. Chief Varthak was frantically sending encrypted messages to their superiors, each one more urgent than the last. The situation had already escalated beyond standard diplomatic protocols and was approaching the kind of incident that resulted in entire civilizations, re-evaluating their place in the galactic hierarchy. "Sir," the Corvan inspector said, their voice carrying the tone of someone delivering very bad news. "I'm receiving reports that similar readings are being detected from other humans throughout the station." This information hit Chief Rarthak like a metaphorical asteroid to the solar plexus. They quickly accessed the station's demographic data, discovering something that should have been routine administrative information, but now felt distinctly ominous. Kepler 442b currently hosted 47 human expatriates, all living quiet lives in various civilian occupations. 47 humans, each presumably carrying personal technology that casually violated known physics. "We need to contain this situation immediately," Rarthak declared, though they were beginning to suspect that containing anything related to humans might be roughly equivalent to containing a supernova with a butterfly net. The human, meanwhile, had been watching this exchange with growing puzzlement. "Look, if there's a problem with my permits, I can contact the embassy. They're usually pretty good about clearing up bureaucratic mix-ups." He reached for his quantum communicator, causing every alien in the vicinity to simultaneously tense, as if he'd just threatened to detonate a stellar demolition charge. The device, which looked suspiciously like an upgraded version of a 20th century communication device, began emitting a soft humming sound that the station's sensors interpreted as localized reality distortion. "Please don't touch anything else," Chief Rarthak said with the desperate politeness of someone trying to negotiate with a natural disaster. "We're just conducting some additional safety check." The human nodded agreeably and settled back to wait, completely oblivious to the fact that his personal belongings had just triggered the galaxy's first technology-induced diplomatic crisis. Around him, station personnel were rapidly implementing emergency protocols designed for everything from terrorist attacks to alien invasion. What they didn't have protocols for was the growing realization that humanity, quiet, unassuming, supposedly primitive humanity, had been casually carrying around technology that made the galaxy's most advanced civilizations look like they were still banging rocks together. The morning shift was definitely not going according to plan. 3 hours after what would later be known as the coffee maker incident, the space around Kepler 442b had transformed from a peaceful mining operation into the galaxy's most heavily armed traffic jam. The arrival of 3 separate battle fleets, each belonging to a different galactic superpower, each convinced the others were orchestrating some elaborate military deception, had created the kind of tense standoff that historians would later describe as aggressively stupid. Admiral Kekstar of the Zephyrian Collective's 7th Crystal Fleet hung suspended in their command matrix, 6 crystalline appendages, interfacing directly with their flagship's tactical system. Their species had evolved past the need for traditional seating, though at the moment they were probably wishing they'd kept chairs just for the comfort value. The tactical display showed 17 Zephyrian dreadnoughts, arranged in what their military doctrine called Defensive Formation Omega, which was essentially a polite way of saying, "We're ready to vaporize everything in sight, but we're being diplomatic about it." "Status report," Kekstar commanded, their voice resonating through the ship's crystal lattice communication system. "Sir, long-range sensors confirm Corvan and Thessian fleet movements," reported their tactical office. "The Corvans have deployed their 4th Iron Legion, 32 heavy cruisers and support vessels. The Thessians brought their diplomatic enforcement squadron, which is their charming euphemism for 41 warships armed with enough firepower to sterilize a moon." Admiral Kekstar's crystalline form shifted to a configuration that roughly translated as profound skepticism. Their species had not maintained galactic superpower status for 3 millennia by believing in coincidence. When the other 2 major powers simultaneously deployed military assets to the same location as a routine mining station inspection, it generally meant someone was planning something unpleasant. Aboard the Corvan flagship Inevitable Consequences, Admiral Grexmore was having similar thoughts while reviewing intelligence reports with the methodical paranoia that had made their species famous throughout the galaxy. The Corvans had evolved from pack hunters on a world where everything, including the plants, had tried to kill them. This background had left them with an institutional assumption that any unexplained event was probably an ambush. Admiral reported their intelligence chief, intercepted communications suggest both the Zephyrians and Thessians are claiming this is a routine response to security concerns. Given that we're all using the exact same excuse, someone is clearly lying. Grexmore's mechanical jaw servo whirred as they processed this information. Their species had replaced most of their organic components with military-grade cybernetics centuries ago, which made them exceptionally good at warfare and exceptionally bad at dinner parties. Analysis of station personnel records reveals 47 human expatriates currently in residence. Cross-reference with known intelligence assets. Sir, the humans all appear to be librarians, archivists, cultural researchers and similar civilian occupations. No known military connection. This information caused Admiral Grexmore to emit a sound like a malfunctioning industrial printer. In their experience, when humans appeared to be harmless civilians, it usually meant they were either extremely dangerous military assets, or about to accidentally cause some kind of catastrophic incident, sometimes both. Meanwhile, on the Thessian command vessel Diplomatic Solution, a name that fooled absolutely no one given its extensive weapons array, Admiral Sithrak was conducting their own analysis of the situation, with the calculating precision that had made their species the galaxy's premier political manipulator. The timing is too convenient, they hissed to their strategy council, their forked tongue flicking with agitation. Both rival powers arrive simultaneously, claiming security concerns, just as our deep space monitoring stations detect unusual energy signatures from the mining facility. Admiral, their science officer, interjected. Preliminary analysis of the energy signatures suggests technology beyond our current understanding. The patterns are unprecedented. This caused Admiral Sithrak's reptilian features to arrange themselves into an expression of deep suspicion. The Thessians had built their civilization on the principle that knowledge was power and ignorance was a luxury they couldn't afford. Discovering technology they didn't understand made them profoundly uncomfortable. Back on Kepler 4442b, the mining station had transformed into something resembling a maximum security research facility crossed with a diplomatic crisis center. Chief Verstak had implemented Lockdown Protocol 7, which meant all civilian personnel were confined to quarters, while security teams conducted what they euphemistically called enhanced safety inspections of every human on the station. The results were not encouraging for anyone's sanity. The human in Residential Block C, a cultural anthropologist studying Zephyrian poetry, owned a personal translation device that apparently processed linguistic patterns by analyzing quantum probability matrices in real time. The human in the engineering section, a maintenance supervisor, carried a diagnostic tool that could perform complete molecular analysis of any substance by looking at it sideways. The human working in the station's archives had a data storage unit that seemed to contain more information than should be physically possible in three-dimensional space. Every human device examined revealed the same impossible pattern, technology that shouldn't exist, functioning with principles that violated established physics, all wrapped up in packaging so mundane it looked like it had been purchased from a discount electronics store. Chief Verstak had progressed beyond nervous tongue-flicking and moved into what their species called existential molting season, a stress response that involved questioning fundamental assumptions about reality. They stood in the station's command center, surrounded by displays showing 3 hostile fleets, 47 humans who apparently carried pocket-sized violations of physics, and a growing stack of incident reports that would require entirely new classification. Sir, reported their communications officer, we're receiving simultaneous demands from all 3 fleet commanders. They want to know why we called them here. We didn't call anyone. Verstak replied with the weary patience of someone whose career had just taken a sharp turn toward the surreal. They all seem to believe this is some kind of trap or secret weapons test. Chief Verstak looked around the command center, where their best security personnel were still trying to figure out how a human's electric toothbrush could perform dentistry at the subatomic level, and realized that perhaps the fleet commanders weren't entirely wrong about the weapons test. They just had the wrong species figured for the ones doing the testing. In his comfortable quarters, the human archivist was reading a book about Thessian diplomatic history, occasionally pausing to check messages on his quantum communicator. He'd noticed the station seemed busier than usual, lots of security personnel running around looking stressed,
but assumed it was probably just another routine drill. The irony that his bedtime reading material was more advanced than most civilizations' entire technological base was completely lost on him. The revelation came, as most universe-altering discoveries do, at precisely the wrong moment and in exactly the right way to cause maximum psychological damage to everyone involved. Chief Verstock had finally managed to establish a three-way communication link between the fleet commanders, hoping to prevent what appeared to be an inevitable shooting war over their mining station. The conversation had been proceeding with the kind of diplomatic courtesy that barely concealed mutual accusations of treachery, when their xenocultural specialist made an observation that would later be taught in military academies as a case study in how one sentence can restructure galactic politics. "Chiefs," the specialist announced with the oblivious enthusiasm of someone about to accidentally end 3 civilizations' peace of mind, "I've been reviewing the human expatriate files, and I think I understand what we're dealing with." Admiral Kekstar's crystalline form shifted to a configuration of intense attention. "Explain." "Well, sir, it appears that all 47 humans on this station are what their species classifies as refugees, or conscientious objectors. They've specifically chosen to live in exile from human space, because they find their own civilization too aggressive." The silence that followed this statement could have been measured in geological epochs. Admiral Greximer was the first to recover. "You're telling us that these are the peaceful humans, the ones who find their own species too violent?" "According to their immigration records, yes. They all cite various reasons for leaving human space: philosophical objections to military expansion, preference for quiet academic life, desire to avoid what one filing describes as the eternal human tendency to accidentally conquer things." Chief Verstock felt their scales beginning to molt in real time as the implications hit home. If these are the humans who deliberately avoid conflict, what exactly are the ones who embrace it carrying around? This question hung in the shared communication channel like a particularly ominous storm cloud. The galaxy's 3 military superpowers had just discovered that their understanding of human technological capabilities was based entirely on observations of the humans who had specifically rejected their own society's mainstream culture. It was roughly equivalent to judging a species' military capabilities by studying their pacifist monks, then discovering the monks could casually manipulate matter at the quantum level. "There's more," the xenocultural specialist continued with the unstoppable momentum of someone delivering a scientific presentation, while oblivious to its apocalyptic implications. "I've been cross-referencing their personal technology with available data on human industrial capacity. Based on the sophistication of these devices, and assuming they represent basic civilian consumer goods, I estimate that mainstream human military technology is approximately," they paused to double-check their calculation, "somewhere between 800 and 2,000 years ahead of our most advanced theoretical research." The communication channel filled with sounds that linguists would later classify as expressions of existential horror in 3 different species, simultaneous. Admiral Sithrak was the first to find their voice. "Are you suggesting that these humans, the ones we've been politely ignoring for the past century while we competed for galactic dominance, have been quietly developing technology that makes our combined fleets look like decorative sculpture?" "Not exactly, sir. According to their cultural files, humans don't really develop technology in the traditional sense. They seem to stumble into it. Their innovation appears to be driven primarily by curiosity, convenience, in what their documentation refers to as 'wouldn't it be cool if.'" Admiral Kekstar made a sound like wind chimes being systematically destroyed. "You're telling us they discovered faster than light travel by accident?" "Well, sir, according to their historical records, they actually discovered it 17 different times by accident. They just kept getting distracted by other projects before they got around to formally documenting it." In his quarters, the human archivist had noticed that the station's ambient lighting had dimmed, a standard energy conservation measure during high-activity periods. He made a mental note to check with facilities management in the morning about whether they needed to adjust the fusion generators. As someone who'd grown up on a human world where every household had its own matter compiler and spatial manipulation was considered basic home maintenance, he found alien technology charmingly primitive, but occasionally unreliable. He was currently using his tablet to research this in historical linguistics, while his coffee maker prepared a perfectly calibrated beverage using controlled fusion reactions that would have required the galaxy's most advanced civilizations to build specialized facilities. The irony that he was learning about alien cultures using technology those same aliens would consider impossible was completely lost on him. Back in the command center, the three fleet commanders were engaged in the kind of rapid strategic recalculation that generally preceded major shifts in galactic power dynamics. "Orders, sir?" asked Admiral Grexmore's tactical officer, their mechanical voice carrying undertones of confusion. "Stand down all weapons systems," Grexmore replied after a long pause. "If our analysis is correct, engaging humans in combat would be roughly equivalent to attacking a force that could reconfigure local space-time for entertainment purposes." "Agreed," Admiral Kextar added, their crystalline form cycling through configurations that expressed resignation mixed with professional respect. "The collective formally recognizes that humanity represents a technological paradigm we are not prepared to challenge." Admiral Sithrak hissed softly, their species equivalent of nervous laughter. "The Thessian Republic concurs. We're diplomatically classifying this incident as a cultural learning experience, and filing it under reasons to maintain friendly relations with humans." Chief Farthak watched the three fleets begin their withdrawal with the mixed relief and existential confusion of someone whose worldview had just been thoroughly renovated. "So what do we do about the humans on the station?" "We do what any rational civilization does when they discover their neighbors have been casually violating physics," Admiral Sithrak replied. "We pretend we never noticed and hope they continue finding us charmingly primitive rather than inconvenient." The communication link closed, leaving Chief Farthak alone with 47 humans who carried technology that could reshape reality, three fleets retreating at maximum safe velocity, and the growing realization that the galaxy's balance of power had just been fundamentally restructured by a coffee maker that happened to run on fusion. In the morning, the human archivist would wake up, make his perfectly brewed coffee, check his messages via instantaneous quantum communication, and head to work to continue his research into alien culture. He would remain completely oblivious to the fact that his mere existence had just prevented an interstellar war and caused three civilizations to quietly revise their understanding of humanity from harmless primitives to friendly neighbors. We should definitely not annoy. The galaxy, as it turned out, was a much more interesting place when you realized that the quiet humans living peacefully in your neighborhoods were the ones their own species considered insufficiently ambitious.